Welcome back, film fans. The Cinehounds Oscars 2026 prep series continues leading up to this weekend's Oscars ceremony. And today we are looking at the final tech categories. So we will be specifically talking about cinematography, VFX, film editing, and sound, what's nominated, and a bit about what we think should be nominated. You will find the other so-called tech categories, the production design categories, including costume and makeup and hair, and a separate previously released episode, which includes a dive into two of this year's most exciting nominees, which you won't find in any other episode. And Lisa and I looked at why the category that nominated them is casting a wider net rather than just nominating the Best Picture nominees over and over. I do recommend starting the entire series with my and David's nominee reactions and Best Picture nominees preview. If you haven't done so yet, you can also catch up on a special episodes on the shorts categories, an international film deep dive, a documentary deep dive, and the year 2025 in animation, looking at especially the nominees, of course, not to mention the Indie Spirit and BAFTA bonus specials. After this, there's just two more left leading up to the ceremony this weekend. The final two episodes will look at writing and directing, and acting and casting. Now, for this episode, like for most episodes, we'll talk about the movie premises and production, but we'll avoid any film spoilers. And okay, I think that's enough preamble. Let me introduce my special guest for this category, Dakota Arsenault. And I am here with Dakota Arsenault. Welcome. You are the creator, host, and producer and editor of ContraZoom. It's a podcast and a blog, which people can find linked in our show notes. I do occasionally write reviews for you there, so I'll link one of those. And also, I was a guest on your recent One Sentimental Begonia After Another podcast episode. But yeah, welcome, Dakota. Glad to have you here on the Lorehounds this time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a real pleasure. I'm glad we can trade off episodes like this. It's always fun when you can do that with another podcaster. So I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Yeah, me too. And I'm especially excited to have you here for these more technical awards because you also work in the industry. Would you mind sharing a bit about your background as it pertains to the film industry?
Sure. Yeah. Currently, I work as an assistant director in film. I have done other things in the past, and I will continue to do different things. But yeah, right now I'm working on a CBS show called Watson, starring Morris Chestnut as an assistant director. My technical title is trainee assistant director. Depending on where you film, they have different names for different jobs. But basically, it means I'm on the entry level of the AD route. I work directly with cast. I do a lot of cueing with them. So if they need to enter the room halfway through the scene, I'm usually there listening to the dialogue and have to let the actors know when they're going. Fun stuff like that. Sometimes I get set background actors as well. Let me do that. And then in the past, I also do lighting. So I'm still trying to figure out what my path in the industry is, but I do work as a lamp operator from time to time, and that's a ton of fun too because it's a very different kind of creative energy that you bring to the set.
Yes, I always noticed you have particular insights into cinematography, which is going to be the first category we're talking about today. So yeah, I'm excited to have you here sharing your insights, but you're also, of course, a death racer. That's how we know each other. How is your death race going?
I mean, it could definitely be going better. Work has been crazy, so my movie watching time has been exclusively on weekends. So as of right now, I am at 29 out of 50 films, and that means I have 0 of the 15 shorts as of this time. I'm hoping to, once we're done this recording, to maybe pound out a category today.
All right. Yeah, that is the good thing about the shorts. As long as you can find access to them, you can like knock out an entire category in a day. Easy peasy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into these four categories today. We're going to be talking about again cinematography, visual effects, film editing, and sound. And starting with, the first two categories are obviously a bit bigger. Let's start with cinematography, where the five nominees are Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, Sinners, and Train Dreams. What is your favorite in this category?
I think pretty easily my favorite is Train Dreams. You know, this is
Okay.
such a stunning film to look at. I know it was shot on digital, but it has that classic film grain look to it. And you know, maybe I'm a bit of a sucker for the post edit film grain edition that they add to films, but I don't
Mm.
care. I love it. It looks so beautiful.
It is an absolutely beautiful film. To set it up quickly, it is directed by Clint Bentley. The cinematographer is Adolfo Veloso, a Brazilian. So you'll notice Brazil going crazy in the comments whenever he wins.
Mhm.
Um, the plot is a logger leads a life of quiet grace as he experiences love and loss during an era of monumental change in early 20th century America. And the movie got four nominations. So we've talked about it in the Best Picture preview. We're talking about it now in cinematography, and we'll talk about it again in original song and adapted screenplay. And this is the first nomination for Veloso. He worked on the last Clint Bentley film, Jockey, which I haven't seen. I don't know if you have.
No, I didn't, unfortunately.
And he's working on an upcoming Shyamalan film, Remain. And I am an M. Night Shyamalan defender. This has in part to do with me coming from Philadelphia, perhaps, but I just like his particular type of twisty horror is absolutely my cup of tea.
Nice. I'm very off and on with him. I haven't seen some of his worst movies, so I think a lot of that is maybe just influenced by public opinion on me, where I'm like, yeah, I have no
Mm,
interest in watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't need
yeah,
to.
that's fair. That one's bad. Yeah, that one is bad.
Or The
And
Lady in
I
the Water or something like that. Yeah.
okay, I will defend the lady in the water.
Hey, there we go. Fair. I haven't seen it, so I can't really say
Yeah,
one way or another.
yeah. But anyway, so Veloso working on Train Dreams. It's, I mean, this film had such a tight production schedule, just a 29-day schedule. So, and that's why, as you said, it was shot digitally rather than on film. But it's absolutely remarkable that he used 99% natural light. Do you think that's something that's easier with digital?
Oh, it absolutely is. The film sensors on digital cameras are insane these days, which is why we often get what we consider darkly lit films. You know, you think of I can't even think of a director off the top of my head right now, but too often, you know, the complaint is I can't see what's going on. I think Game of Thrones is the best example of people complaining about things not being lit properly, is because the sensor is so strong that when you're filming it, you can see what's going on and you don't need a ton of light. Whereas when you're working with film, you have to use more light to overcompensate. And so that's why older films shot on film have a very different look, because you're overlighting to the point where
Hmm.
you can see way more. And so now that they're able to scale back and use less and less and less and less, unfortunately, we've sort of reverted to the opposite side of the spectrum where we're like, okay, guys, can we overlight this a little bit, please?
Yeah. Yeah, or although it's like shooting day for night and then you put that dark filter over it, that's what kills me with, the complaints about House of the Dragon, for example.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
day for night stuff is I haven't had a ton of experience doing it. Usually it's like if we're inside a building or whatever, then we're just like blasting super bright lights inside. And that's, you know, if we're not looking outside, you can't really tell that much. But sometimes if you're using filters and things like that, it definitely is much more noticeable, especially if you're
right.
filming outside. I've never done that outside. I've just done
Hmm.
like when we're inside and, you know, you're blasting 20K lights inside to mimic
Right.
the sun.
Right. And I just know from my amateur still photography, like night shooting, night lighting is always the worst. And so with the natural light here, they had to make that a part of the story, the something like a fire or candles to create real light. And it almost creates this sort of German impressionistic, but in color lighting scenario where there's just you feel the darkness, the wilderness around him, because he has to hover close to this bright light that's, his source of comfort.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not
Um,
too sure where they say 99% natural light. I'm not too sure what they would have used the 1%. I'm guessing maybe in scenes that take place at night or using fire because yeah, shooting with fire, it's an uncontrollable element, so you're using fire bars and things like that, which create great light. But if you're facing the actors and you're not facing the fire, the light will have settings. Now the digital lights will have settings that mimic the look of fire. So that's probably what was used to safely recreate the look of fire from like when we're looking directly at like Joel Edgerton's face
mm,
and things like that.
okay, okay. And they used spherical lenses in part because this movie has the most expansive. One of the things that makes the cinematography so remarkable is the expansive views of, the American wilderness. Do you have any insight into that side of things?
Unfortunately, not really. Camera is a department that's still sort of baffles me. I like watching
Hmm.
them work and things like that.
Hmm.
From what I understand, that just means that they're using wider angle lenses so that way
Right.
they can capture as much as possible, as opposed to something with a more narrow focal length, which you'll get with much more personal, smaller films where you're not trying to show off the vast beauty of Oregon that Train Dreams is trying to do.
Right. And he also used a somewhat unusual, aspect ratio because he used a 3:20 aspect ratio because it mimicked the old photographs he was looking at for inspiration. I have to say, aspect ratio is one of those things that I often don't notice it unless it changes mid-scene or people point it out.
Mhm.
Uh, but I find it so interesting because it does have an effect, like, well, we'll talk about Sinners next, but, during that surreal montage when it suddenly changes and it's like it's pulling you into the screen.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely notice when films that have IMAX sequences when that change happens. You literally your eyes go wider as it happens. You're like, whoa. I agree with you. A lot of the time, I don't notice aspect ratio, although I am a bit of a sucker for a good wonky aspect ratio, especially if something more squared. Uh,
Mhm.
one of my favorite films is a ghost story, and that's very much a square aspect
Right.
ratio. So I love sort of when they play around with that. I did notice that this had a bit of a different aspect ratio. That it was a bit different than our usual, what they call the Academy ratio or different things like that. They talk about that, and oftentimes I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. But like, as a viewer, you're watching at home, you're watching in the theater. It's a little hard to tell, like you said, unless it's changing mid scene.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, so Train Dreams, I think, to use your terminology, do you want to explain your terminology you use in your podcast for how likely something is to win? You have four terms.
Yeah, sure. My system is I sort of categorize films into four chances of how likely they are to win, and that's front runner, and that's usually the top 1 to 2 films in a 5 nominee category. Dark horse, which is kind of in the 2 to 3 range in a 5 category race. Long shot, which is in sort of the 3 to 4 range, and then just happy to be there is usually 4 or 5. I say these numbers being flexible because it could very much differ. We're not going to talk about song today, but like you think of that category where it's like it's very much golden K-pop Demon Hunters. That's the front runner. Nothing else is really close. That's the number one in that category. And then you got I Lied
I
to You.
lied to you. I'm a truther.
Yes, it is a fantastic song. Um, that's clearly the number two,
Hmm.
and nothing else is close to that. So like that's the dark horse
Yeah.
to me. And then after that, you've kind of got the long shots and just happy to be there. Frankly, for me in that category, the final 3 songs are just happy to be there
Right.
because there is no path to victory for any of them.
I mean, the Oscars are not even letting them perform, so yeah, so using your terminology, I would call this, I suppose, a dark horse. It's won 3 awards so far, including the Critics' Choice Award, the Film Independent Spirit Award, several others. It was, runners up in several places. It's missed 6 of its nominations. Then the one we'll talk about next, I think, is the front runner. But do you think dark horse for this one as well?
It sort of feels like it's kind of creeping up to being co-front runner status to me. We'll talk about the other film, but like it sort of feels that like if Sinners doesn't have as good of a night at the Oscars as maybe some people might be predicting, I think this is easily a category that someone else can come in and win. In Train Dreams is the
Would be
biggest
that one.
beneficiary of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It very much sort of feels like, you know, uh, I don't want to say like the true lovers of cinematography are going to vote for Train Dreams over Sinners, but it sort of feels like you're going to have a large contingent of people being like, no, this is legitimately the best cinematography of the year, regardless of anything else in this category, our thoughts on this movie, things like that. And it sort of feels like there's going to be another section of voters that are like, we love Sinners so much. Yes, the cinematography is beautiful. We're also going to vote for it here just because we love Sinners so much.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. So let's shift over to talking about Sinners. That is my favorite in this category. And again, the film directed by Ryan Coogler, Dance with the Devil, trying to leave their troubled lives behind. Twin brothers return to their hometown to start again, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. You've probably heard me rattle off that summary before because this has gotten a record 16 nominations. So we've already talked about it in Best Picture Preview, in production design, costumes, and makeup and hair. We're talking about it today in all four categories. And then we'll talk about it again in song and score, and in director and original screenplay, actor, supporting actress, supporting actor, and casting. But what we're talking about it right now is for cinematography, where the cinematographer is Autumn Durald Archipel, an American cinematographer. This is her first nomination, although she did also work on Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Loki, The Last Showgirl, etc. Um, and this one, yeah, I talked about, the aspect ratio change, particularly in that one special scene they call the surreal montage. But this for me, the reason why it's my favorite, that is, by the way, dictated by the fact that they're using two different cameras, the IMAX camera and an Ultra Panavision camera. But yeah, what makes this my favorite, I think, is just sort of the seamlessness of the cinematography with the film overall. Um, that's something that I really admire about Ryan Coogler films, is just how everyone works together in a way that we'll talk about it again in VFX a bit more, but in a way that's sometimes it makes it almost invisible, but there's still such impressive things. Like for me, this film first sucked me in with the car sequence, and they had these long shots throughout, like the long shot at the shops with Lee Jun Lee, the long shot in the car sequence, obviously the surreal montage. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Sinner's cinematography?
I mentioned at Train Dreams where I'm a sucker for movies that are shot on film or look like they're shot on film. And so, I can't play favorites for Train Dreams and not talk about how much I love the cinematography in Sinners as well, because this is shot on film and it is stunning to look at. The grain of it is really beautiful. You get this really great aspect when the sun is out, and so it doesn't quite look blown out, but the background, it definitely is far more brighter than you normally see. And that's a very
Hmm.
unique thing that we don't really get with a lot of films. And then there's just, like you were talking about, some very impressive sequences. Sometimes it's simple as just holding the camera steady in the passenger seat as a car while they're driving along. And, we get these long, beautiful moments. And then sometimes it's these crazy sequences. I think especially of like when all the vampires are dancing in the giant circle and it pulls back.
Mm.
You just see how many people it is and how dark it is out there, and all you guys, these like they're all holding torches and things like that, and just how stunning sequences like that are. It's hard not to just wax poetically about how beautiful this film is. It's phenomenal. I really love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is another one. I mean, suppose this is sort of a trend, but we talked about the natural lighting. Archipel is here also going for stylized naturalism, is how she puts it. And yeah, things like sometimes cinematography isn't about doing the fanciest shot, but about the decisions that you make. Like you say, just planting a, a camera in a car to allow you to get to know some characters. Yeah, and you know, they those one shots, they the way they fake also, like with that surreal montage. I cannot imagine the overall coordination that went into that one scene. That must have been crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we would be remiss if we didn't mention that Arcapal is the first woman of color nominated in this category. She is a Filipino on her mother's side and African American Creole on her father's side. And this is kind of a category that's been late to the table overall in moving beyond just white men. In 2017, as recently as that, Bradford Young was the first Black cinematographer to be nominated for on his work for Arrival. And in the next year, 2018, was when the first woman, Rachel Morrison, was nominated for Mudblood. And this was the last non-acting category to nominate a woman. So, yeah, this. Why do you think this category in particular is boys' club so much?
I unfortunately that's just what it is. You know, the people that end up rising through the ranks of to become a cinematographer, you usually come from one of three avenues. You either come from the camera angle, you come from the lighting angle, or coming from the grip side of things. Uh, Usually, the best cinematographers come from lighting because they understand it the best. Whereas, you know, camera, you're very much like insular. You know your technology inside and out, but you don't really know how to light a scene. Uh,
Mm,
just adding a bit of context there. But I don't know. It's unfortunately just a bit of a boys' club, and I don't really know why. I was working recently with a female director on the show I'm on, and she came up through camera, and she's a terrific director. And we were talking about that a little bit, and she had asked me if I'd worked with a female cinematographer yet, and I had to say no, I have not. Um, and frankly, I don't even know any in Vancouver where I'm based that are, which is a real shame. I went to high school with a girl who has now become a cinematographer, working mostly in Canadian film, and it's super impressive at both how young she is to get to that position to be doing movies that are released, you know, theatrically, not just TV work, which is a very different, you know, animal, and the fact that she's a woman as well, which is considering the boys club you have to break through is just impressive. I think it's just, you know, there's only one cinematographer on a set, and so jobs are limited, and people want
hmm
people who have experience, and so you keep hiring the same people over and over again, and it's not really the place where you try new things and hire new people. And so, unfortunately, um, women have been left behind, and you know, it seems like that is slowly changing, but unfortunately, the very key word here is slowly.
mm,
Autumn won't be the first, won't be the last, thankfully.
hmm
Um, but you know, this is going to be the category where it might be another 3 or 5 years where someone different other than her maybe gets a nomination, which is a real shame.
Yeah. I wonder though if this narrative helps her a bit. I think that the obviously, as I've said, that the film warrants it on its own right, but I do want, you know, the voters do love a narrative. It has won so far. It is the front runner. It's won 18 awards so far, been honored two more times. It's missed nine nominations, and there's three awards pending, including, of course, the Oscars and the American Society of Cinematographers. So I still feel personally confident putting this in front runner status. Um, what do you think? What status would you give One Battle After Another in this race?
That's the tricky one. That sort of I thought originally was a dark horse, but it sort of seems to be falling as Train Dreams is rising.
Mm,
So it's sort of, you know, dropping down a bit more to, I guess, on the lower end of dark horse, because I do believe that both Sinners and Train Dreams are the front runners in this film, in this category.
right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would at least give, I suppose, One Battle Dark Horse status. Just to set it up, this is the Paul Thomas Anderson film about when their evil nemesis resurfaces after 16 years, a band of ex revolutionaries reunite to rescue the daughter of one of their own. I forgot to mention that there is a deep dive into Sinners in the show notes. There are 3 deep dives into One Battle After Another. David was very activated by this film and talked to different groups of people about it. It received 13 nominations, so the second most this year. So we talked about it in Best Picture Preview and Production Design, and we're talking about it today in 3 of the categories: cinematography, editing, and sound. And we'll talk about it again in score, director, adapted screenplay, actor, supporting actress, supporting actor times 2, and casting. And the cinematographer is Michael Bauman, an American, first nomination, but known for Paul Thomas Anderson collaborations like The Phantom Thread and Licorice Pizza. Also has worked with, for example, Ryan Murphy and Max Winkler on television. What? Why do you think people love the cinematography for One Battle After Another, and why do you think that it's getting less attention than the other two now?
It's interesting because, this is, if you want to call it, the co-front runner for Best Picture along with
Mm-hmm.
Sinners. Uh, the talk of the cinematography oddly has been very quiet, especially since, Paul Thomas Anderson is very much known for having beautifully photographed films. I look at the other things that Bauman has worked with PTA. Phantom Thread, in my opinion, is one of the most beautifully shot movies of the 21st
Sure.
century. It is stunning, the way that they photograph that. There's so many moments that just sort of live rent free in my head. I think of like the New Year's ball scene, things like that. And I think it's just because this is, a contemporary film. It isn't as flashy. It's not trying to be flashy with its gorgeous cinematography, but it's still there. I know a lot of the talk is about the incredible car chase sequence, which you and I talked about as well
Mm-hmm.
on my podcast, and it's fantastic. It's so unique and it's different. It's out there, and I know they sort of talked about like they lucked out with the location. The location made that shot, not necessarily
Right.
what they were trying to do for it. Obviously, the type of lens that they would have been using on the camera to give this sort of nauseating up and down effect as they were going driving up and down the hills. But for me, a sequence I thought was even better was the sort of the Underground Railroad. I don't know how to say it, the ringing of the alarm bells when we get a bit of a chase sequence sort of going on, and you get all these skateboarders suddenly emerging out of nowhere, and they're shooting flares off, and people are running all around and jumping over rooftops and all this sort of stuff. I thought that was far more of an exciting, beautifully shot sequence for me, where it was just I was so enthralled at this. I know you're not as high on this movie as I am. Um,
But the cinematography is fantastic. That I think that's my favorite part of the film. So,
okay, yeah, I was gonna say, but I hope you also appreciate the cinematography.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love also. I'm a sucker for using an updated 70s style motif well, and this particularly does that. I've realized with between this and Begonia that I'm a sucker for Vista Vision,
Yeah.
which apparently 75 to 80% of this was shot in 35 millimeter Vista Vision. So it's we've talked about French Connection for subscribers have access to that episode. That was apparently a big inspiration here, and you can see that for sure, but definitely a much more modern version thereof. It's not just copying it, it's literally using it as inspiration.
Oh, 100%. You definitely feel William Friedkin's, you know, influence all over this film. It definitely feels like something that he would have made too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And apparently they used also like you see the saturation is amped up versus the 70s stuff. That's apparently inspired by Wong Kar-wai. Um yeah, you can just see that this is filmed by people with a great love of film, but also a creative mind. Because, you're just talking about that. Yeah, how do they film they give credit to the location for that hill sequence, the car chase. Um, but they had to make a lot of creative and technical decisions to pull that off so well, so that that's people are talking about that sequence in particular to the extent that they are.
Hmm. And then, like, I don't know if you've seen this come across your social feed or not, but I saw something about where it's like, if the sequence is interesting, if the action on the screen is interesting enough, people don't care about continuity. And so they're showing clips from the final scene of the movie, basically when Leo and his daughter are reunited, and the cloud coverage just constantly changes from shot to shot, from coverage of between Leo and Chase Infinity. It's not equal. And like, that's a nightmare. You're not supposed to do that at all. That completely breaks the rules of filmmaking in terms of continuity. The editor must have been pulling their hair out trying to figure out, well, these don't look the same. But the problem is, none of that matters. And that's not a problem, because if you have such an engaging moment, like, I didn't walk out being like, oh man, the lighting was so uneven in that final scene. No, it felt natural. It felt like the clouds were changing. Normally, that's something when you're outside, you are doing your best to contain and make sure that it's always looking the same. So that means if small clouds are passing by, you're not filming until the clouds clear. If there are big clouds that you can't wait for, you are overcompensating with more light, or using things like balloons to bounce light to mimic natural light, things like that. And they were just like, to hell with it. No, we've got, a dynamic scene. The moment is about the emotions going on between these two being reunited. It's not about what does the lighting look like in this. And it shows, because frankly, I'm sure most people would never even notice if they weren't pointing it out.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was also praising Sinners for. So I'm glad you do point it out here, because that is, it's difficult with awards, but what I am most impressed by are the things that you don't notice unless someone points it out,
Mhm.
the things that they make look effortless. But yeah, this one surprisingly has not gotten the cinematography attention that you would expect. I think it's just because it's a particularly competitive year. It's won 4 awards, been honored 4 times. It's had 16 other nominations it didn't win because. Oh wait, no, sorry, 15, because it did win the BAFTAs for this.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that is a major precursor that gives it a shot of hope. I have to say, this year, the precursors are kind of chaos in a lot of categories, and I kind of love that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's still up for a few more awards yet, including American Society of Cinematographers. I think that'll be interesting. That's on March 8th, 1 week before the Oscars. It'll be interesting to see who wins there in regards to predicting this category. But I think it seems in third place, in my opinion. Well, my opinion on that has certainly changed. Stay tuned for the outro update at the end for more about that. But for now, this is a great place to take a quick break before we dive into the last 3 contenders in the cinematography category. What do you think between Marty Supreme and Frankenstein? Which do you think is in fourth place?
Oh, definitely Marty Supreme.
Okay. So Marty Supreme, Josh Safdie film about Marty Mauser, a young man with a ping pong world domination dream no one respects, who goes to hell and back in pursuit of greatness. This one got 9 nominations this year. So we talked about in the Best Picture preview and production design and costume. Today, cinematography and editing. Also, director, original screenplay, actor, casting. And yeah, it's not in makeup, which some people thought it should be, which just because Gwyneth Paltrow thought that Timothy Chalamet had real zits. Oh, the horror.
That was a great story. And she's recommending him products for his
Yeah.
skin. Love it.
He's like, no, I mean, I have the complexion of a nymph. What do you
Yeah.
think?
You ever seen a baby's bottom? That's this face.
Yeah. Oh, but I love, listeners know that I love the makeup category in particular this year. So I'm not sad about that miss there. um, Before cinematography, the cinematographer is Darius Kanji, an Iranian French cinematographer. This is his third nomination after Evita, Bardo, False Chronicles of a Handful of Truths was the last one. But he was also the cinematographer for Uncut Gems, which is like, in my mind, the unofficial Marty Supreme prequel.
Hmm.
Um, and he was also cinematographer for this year's Mickey 17 and Eddington, which I love Mickey 17. I think it's underrated. Eddington, I didn't love, but the cinematography is great.
That's fair. That's fair.
What do you think about the cinematography in Marty Supreme?
I think it's terrific. You know, this is the third film in the category that's shot on film. I would love more films to be shot on film because they always look so much better. Darius Kanji, in my mind, is a legend. They don't really talk about his name in the same vein as some of the greats, but like I first noticed his work in Seven, the David Fincher film. Uh,
Mm.
I recently went and saw it. I think it was last year when it was re-released with a 4K restoration. And my God, is that movie just gorgeous to look at? Like it's also far more darker than I remembered because it had been a while. It's like, oh man, this movie's depressing. Um, but it's stunning to look at, and the work that Kanji does here is also equally beautiful. One of my favorite sequences is the final match in the British Open, where you've got it takes place in the stadium, and the ping pong table is nice and brightly lit. You can see all the action very clearly, and then you just see rows and rows and rows of people, and they're all backlit, but it's very, very dim lit. So you can see the heads of the people moving and their heads watching as the ping pong ball's going back and forth. But like all the action, all your attention is being focused directly in the middle of the screen. It's just so beautiful to look at.
Hmm. And this is another one that was shot on 35 millimeter film. Why do you think this format is having such a moment right now?
I don't know why. I'm not going to complain about it. Like it's one of those things where I'm like,
No,
oh,
no.
don't scare it away. Please keep shooting on 35 mil. I don't know. I think it's just a lot of these filmmakers. We're talking about the French Connection and movies like that where you're being
Mhm.
inspired by. I think we're now at the point of a generation where you know, these are the filmmakers that they're looking up to is the 70s and what were
Right.
they doing in the 70s. And there's so many great filmmakers, sort of like the post new Hollywood guys that were big at the time. And I think all these filmmakers are just sort of in love with the look and feel of their films, and they're like, this is what I want. And so I don't know what it is, if there's anything else, but that's just sort of what it feels to me. Like it really feels like um a renaissance of 70s like films.
Mhm. Yeah, it does. Yeah, this 35 millimeter, the way it captures or doesn't capture detail does give it that vintage tinge, which they
Mm.
can, as I was talking about with One Battle, update with, the sort of modern higher resolution and things like that. So it's this nice, I suppose, hybrid of these eras. And I do like that this is another one. It used anamorphic lenses. These cinematography competitors this year are just like eating up the sky, sort of. They're creating a lot of these wide, expansive shots, which I am myself actually kind of a sucker for.
Mhm. I mean, it's hard not to fall in love with that style of filmmaking. The sequences of like Marty running through the streets of New York City. I have no idea how big their sets were, or if it was built, or if they were using real locations. I don't know. I didn't look into that. But like, you feel like you were transported back to like when The Godfather was being made. That felt like he was running on the same streets that they filmed on back then, or just that general era of New York filmmaking, and I love that. And it just looks so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, this one is apparently A24's most expensive film to date with a budget of 60 to 70 million. So it surpasses Civil War from 2024. Um, and you can see it. You can see it. We've talked about it
Oh, yeah.
already in the production design. Yeah, you can see it in the way that it's captured. You can see it in the cast. I'll say that.
Yes, yeah. No, I'm very much like a fan, I wish the Academy did a better job at recognizing, subtle films for its makeup and hairstyling and costume and things like that. Obviously, this does have a nomination for costume, but like if it got a nomination for hair and makeup, I wouldn't be opposed. I think it does a
No,
very good job with giving people period accurate looks and feels to them.
and pimples. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, and pimples. That's something I feel like the Academy doesn't do well. Where unless you're, a Victorian era film, you're not typically getting a costume nomination unless you're doing the most over the top, latex work for hair and makeup. You're not getting a nomination there. That sort of thing. Um, it seems like this year, because we didn't get those types of films, we're getting some more unique nominations in those categories. But
Hmm.
I would love it if that trend continued. Frankly.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's why we talked about this also in the costume episode, but I don't mind, for instance, when the Emmys separates into, all right, let's do period, let's do sci-fi, let's do contemporary as three different categories. I'm like, it does make a certain kind of sense.
100%, because the needs are very different,
Mhm.
and like so often contemporary stuff is just completely ignored, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Not that this film is contemporary.
No, it does. I mean, but it's more contemporary than the one we'll talk about next, Frankenstein. I'll say this one just to wrap it up. Yeah, it hasn't really won anything, which I think is not a knock against the cinematography as much as just like it's such a competitive year. We've already talked about the three others. And let's bring the last contender in this category onto the table, Frankenstein, the Guillermo del Toro version about Dr. Frankenstein, a brilliant but egotistical scientist who brings a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that ultimately leads to the undoing of both the creator and his tragic creation. I always quibble with the last part of that because I don't. Well, anyway, no spoilers, even though it's Frankenstein. There is a film deep dive in the episode notes. I did an entire series, so you can also listen to me talk about the 30s episodes with Aisha from Every Sci-Fi Film Ever podcast. This one received 9 nominations. So we talked about in Best Picture Preview. It's going to dominate the production design, costumes, and makeup and hair categories. Talking about it today for cinematography and sound, and we'll talk about it again for score, adapted screenplay, and supporting actor. The cinematographer for this one is Dan Lauston, a Danish cinematographer. This is his third nomination after The Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley. So, yes, Del Toro, collaborator extraordinaire. But also, he's worked on, for instance, John Wick, and this year's The Gorge. What are your thoughts on the Frankenstein cinematography?
I don't like it.
Okay.
I am a huge Guillermo del Toro fan. I
Hmm.
love his movies, and they're often, some of the most beautifully shot movies of the year they come out. He loves using practical sets, trying to minimize the amount of CGI where possible, and it just sort of felt like I don't know what the hell he was doing with this movie. Like, I know this was a huge passion project for him. I recently talked about this film on my podcast with Jeff Bulmer from Classic Movies Live, and he had a lot of great insight into how book accurate this film is, because that's something they're touting a lot. But my big
Right.
complaint about it is it just feels so fake. Everything about this movie feels so
Hmm.
fake and artificial, where I know they were building real sets, and when I go back and look at stills, I can appreciate it. But when I watch the film, and I saw it in a theater, I saw it at a film
Hmm.
festival, not at home, and I was just so disappointed in every way about the look and feel of this movie. In particular, the worst moment of the movie, where for me, was the lab explosion. When that happened, I know we're going to talk about the special effects a little bit,
Hmm.
but I went from being like, okay, yeah, I think I like this movie too. Nope, this movie does not work for me at all. And I never got back on board again.
Yeah. Well, we won't. Yeah, we won't talk about the special effects for this movie. So feel free to throw that into this
Oh,
conversation.
right. Yeah, it's not nominated. Good. Thank
Yeah.
God it's not nominated. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, I have several episodes deep diving into the entire Frankenstein, like the history back from the books. Um, and yeah, so as in terms of accuracy, I talked about my feelings about that a lot there. I think that it is quite accurate in spirit, but with, it's the way it's been adapted to Del Toro's life. It has, you can see that reflected in it. So I did, yeah, a lot of conversation about that. I'll say I am happy with it in that regard. I understand what you mean about the fakeness of it, because I was actually surprised that some things were not in the volume and actually were outdoors. And I think it has to do with the VFX used in like the sky, for example.
Yeah.
But I am extremely passionate about like the production design and especially the costumes. I really want the costumes to win. I talked about that a lot. Um, as far as cinematography, I mean, I think for me, do you find a lot of people often confuse cinematography and production design?
Um, I I don't think I do. It's tough because
Not that you do, but other people do. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's so tough
Mhm.
because cinematography includes everything. It includes the way the costumes look on screen. So it's so often it's easy to sort of default, oh, I didn't like the look of the sets, so that's the look of the film. So it's sometimes it's hard to separate for I think for some people, but I don't think I've personally noticed people talking to me like that about it.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm more passionate about the design side of things than the cinematography. It does uh yeah, they used a lot of wide shots in large formats, so you can see some behind the scenes things that just really take in that production design rather well. And so
Mhm.
I really appreciate that aspect of it. Um, they were using an even narrower, like 24 millimeter lens, and a lot of wide angle shots. So just really exaggerating in a sort of colorfully gothic way, which is what Del Toro was going for. So I appreciate those aspects of it. And also the way they did lighting, though, it's, they talk about it in the same way that Train Dreams does, where they say, oh, we favor a single natural source, or, like a window or fire, something, a lantern, something like that. But there's just something about the way it's captured that makes it feel less like Train Dreams. Every shot feels so authentic. And indeed, this one feels manufactured.
100%. And I think the choice of camera movements aid to that as well. There's so many of these like big sweeping movements that just felt fake and sort of disorienting at times, which is a real frustration for me. I think of like the camera going over the ice for the ship stuff, and it's just like flying, zipping through the air. I'm just like, what are we doing here? This is supposed to be this very intimate, personal story, and it feels like it's shot like a Marvel movie.
Hmm. Yeah, for instance, they also did for the underwater shots, they did a dry for wet illusion, which, um, to be fair, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever did actually shoot underwater for underwater scenes, but here it just combines it adds to this feeling of artificiality, which, to be honest, I don't really mind for this movie because it is a sort of overblown fairy tale.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do agree that it is the least interesting out of this category because it is a quite competitive year.
Yeah, it's almost like he couldn't decide if he wanted it to be this dreamlike world or this very intimate, personal world or this over the top, bombastic world, and
Hmm.
we're getting all of that combined together, and it just sort of feels muddled.
¿Por qué no los tres? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Why not all three?
So this one has not, it's won 3 awards so far. It didn't win 16 others. It's up again for the same awards as the other films. Probably not going to win. So I think we agree Sinners and Train Dreams are the only two with feels like a real shot at this award.
That's what it seems like, yeah. Although
Yeah.
with one battle winning the BAFTA, does that change things?
Yeah, that is a good question. Maybe we should be paying more attention to that again. Although BAFTA always zags where the others zig.
Mhm.
So who knows? I did predict that the BAFTA would give more to One Battle After Another, and then maybe there would be a reaction in certain categories in favor of Sinners
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
voting opened just a few days after.
that's true. This feels like this could be a category that could, whoever's the big winner of the night could easily scoop this up as an additional one. This doesn't seem like it has like that hard and fast front runner like so many other categories, though.
Right, right. Um, so just to shout out, this is a category that gets a short list. There were 16 in total. The other ones that were on it were Ballad of a Small Player, Begonia, Die My Love, F1, Hamnet, Nouvelle Vague, Sentimental Value, Seurat, Song Sung Blue, Sound of Falling, and Wicked for Good. Um, Out of those, like, I would have loved to have seen Sound of Falling on here, maybe instead of Frankenstein. Uh, Begonia also used that Vista Vision, like I said, but Sound of Falling just had some really remarkable cinematography.
For me, it would have been Ballad of a Small Player.
I like that film.
I did too. You know, people were too hard on it.
Yeah.
Um, I watched it, and I do my own personal Oscar rankings of everything that I've seen based on the categories. And I think I have Ballad of a Small Player as my number one or number two shot film of the year. It is stunningly beautiful film. I love the over the top saturation that Berger used in that film.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was kind of like a fun story. Like, I'm not gonna say it's the best written film of the year, but I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I just have to give an extra shout out to Resurrection, which technically isn't, I guess, eligible for this year because it was released after the international window in China. But anyway, No Other Choice, which was eligible for this year and has, in my opinion, the best cinematography of the year. And The Long Walk, I thought had exceptional cinematography. I don't know if you have any others you want to shout out for their cinematography this year.
Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of what they were. I'm actually trying to pull up my list as we speak here. Um, oh yeah, I really like Materialists. I know, we're
Okay.
talking about modern films and things like that. I thought they did a lot of really interesting things in showing that film, the love story in that film. I know a lot of people weren't crazy about it. I liked it more than Past Lives, which I know is a bit of sacrilege. But I really like the
Yeah.
cinematography in it.
I can't agree on liking it more than Past Lives, but yeah, I can see on the cinematography what you're saying. um, okay, this is a good place to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the other biggest category of this episode, which is visual effects. See you in a moment. And welcome back. And let's dive into visual effects. Just a note for this category, the award goes to individuals, but I will be calling out the primary VFX company responsible or they work for. The 5 nominees are Avatar Fire and Ash, F1, Jurassic World Rebirth, The Lost Bus, and Sinners. So let's start with the juggernaut. Avatar Fire and Ash, the James Cameron film. This is about in the wake of the devastating war against the RDA and the loss of their eldest son, Jake Sully, and Neytiri face a new threat on Pandora, the Ash people, a violent and power-hungry Na'vi tribe led by the ruthless Varang. And my cat Ghost is very upset about this, if you can hear that. Um, Jake's family must fight for their survival and the future of Pandora in a conflict that pushes them to their emotional and physical limits. 2 nominations this year, which is down quite a bit from previous versions. So just costume and VFX. We talked about costume already. Lisa, my guest for that episode, she defended its right to be included in the category. But I'm personally down on this film versus past incarnations. What's your feeling about the Avatar franchise?
I will say this. I am an avowed Avatar hater. That said,
Okay.
Fire and Ash was the best of the series so far.
Hot take. Hot
A
take.
little bit. I know. I know.
All right.
Yeah, it's a bit of a unique feeling for sure. I don't know. Yeah, I really could not give a damn about these Avatar movies. Like the fact that I'm still watching them 3 movies in just kills me. But I enjoyed it. I thought the new characters were interesting. We're here because of the VFX. I thought the VFX was very strong. Now I know
Hmm.
that the franchise is 2 for 2 for winning. Will they be 3 for 3? I don't know. Um, but yeah, I feel like we've settled into the world nicely enough where I'm not annoyed by the tropes and rehashing of other white savior narratives that we've now experienced many other times. This is not uh, the third incarnation of Pocahontas or trying to think of other ones off the top of my head. Dances with Wolves, things like that.
Right.
um, I don't know, and I thought that the characters, yeah, I just thought that the fire people were done very well. I thought they were very interesting. Um, specifically the performance from Una Chaplin as Varang. I thought she was excellent, bringing that
Hmm.
character to life.
Yeah, Varang, the new character, is definitely the highlight of this movie for me. The low light of this movie for me is the writing, which is unfortunately the thing I care about the most. I was so, and maybe it's also because it's 3.5 hours long, and I chose to see it in 4DX, which was that was great for the last movie when you're like floating and it smells like ambergris. Um, but for this one, it was just like very jerky, and I was getting a headache, and it smelled like burnt chocolate all the time.
I can only imagine.
So I was by the end of the movie, I was like, just end.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't fault the VFX. So this is all right. I never know how to pronounce this company. Veda. How
I
do you
think it's
pronounce
Veda. I think it's Veda.
Veda?
Yeah.
Okay, with the two long lines over the E and the A. But anyway, this is, of course, most famously the company set up for the Lord of the Rings movies. They are like the premier VFX company in the world. We'll talk about some other big juggernauts, but this is I think that this is become known as having the best in the business. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think to the average moviegoer, if they were to be able to name one VFX company, this is the one that they'll be able to name because this is the
Right.
only VFX company I can name.
Well, we'll talk about like ILM next is another big
Oh
one,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
True. Yeah.
But so the those who are nominated, the actual nominated people are Joe Lettery, Richard Bannerman, Eric Saindon, and Daniel Barrett, and they're all Americans except for Bannerman. And they are all multi nominees, especially the lead of this, the Lettery. It's his 12th nomination, and he's won 5 times for the Avatars, Lord of the Rings, yeah, King Kong. Just so definitely, I think he might be walking home with the sixth this time. But yeah, the other is Bannerman. This is his third nomination, third for Saindon, fifth for Barrett. This is a very well decorated team.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And like the fact that it's because they're all basically Veda people, you look at the movies that they work on and they are always on the cutting edge. This is such an interesting category because for us, we look at it like, oh, what one looks the coolest? But often, along with the makeup and hairstyling, we're not there for the bake-offs, so we don't actually hear about uh, how they are changing the industry, and that's so much more how this award is dictated. Yes, it often coincides with, ooh, which one is the prettiest to look at? But
Hmm.
because it'll be things like, oh, the texture of water. This is what we are pushing forward for this film, and this is why it won. Wins best visual effects, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of different examples, but like that's essentially
Yeah.
how these awards are given out for specifically those two categories. Uh, Invada is the most innovative studio on the planet right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are the most technologically advanced studio on the planet. But can I say, here's my hottest take in the VFX category:
Please,
is I would give it to a film that's not even nominated that people have been hating on, Tron Ares. I think that this Avatar Fire and Ash has, the best looking in terms of the fact you're watching this 3D film and it really feels like these are real people, with skin you could touch, things like that. The amount of detail is incredible. But for me, Tron Ares did some of the most original things that I've never seen anywhere else before, with like the way they combined the futuristic slick aesthetic of the second film with the retro techno aspect of the original film and made it all look 2025, and the way they did certain effects like they would have the bikes going through the real world and leaving behind this trail of red. I absolutely loved the technical aspects of Tron Ares, and that excites me more than this one did, where it was absolutely gorgeous, but it was like they literally went back to the same setting as the
Mhm.
prior movie. And for some reason, I noticed more this time that the backgrounds were flatter.
Mm. Okay.
So I think this one's going to win, and I don't begrudge it that win. Avatar, of course. I mean, um, and people will talk about the motion capture, and obviously, I think what people underestimate is the amount of post work that's done to make the motion capture look really human or Navi, as the case may be. Um, but yeah, I'm more excited by other films this year.
Oh, and I totally get that sentiment. Like, I think a lot of people were going into Oscar season specifically, worried about Wicked for Good and the fact
Hmm.
that it ended up blanking because it was like, we've already been here. It was part one, part two. It's the same movie, just split in half sort of thing. And I guess Oscar voters felt the same way because it
Hmm.
got 0 nominations. But that's sort of how it feels with Avatar, where every once in a while we'll sort of get these franchises where they get repeat nominations. I think of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, winning costume design for both films. I'm like, okay, like the first
I
one.
I defended that though because I feel like she was genuinely innovative with the
She
second
was.
one because of the demands, the physical and design demands of the new telecom group.
Yes, I think that's fair. It was unique enough, but that sort of similar feeling where it's like we've been here before. We're seeing these things. I want to see different winners. I want to see different nominees, and I think with the Avatar franchise specifically, people feel that fatigue. Uh,
Hmm.
like it's boring to be like Avatar is great visual effects. We know Avatar is great visual effects.
Right. Right.
Is
Yeah.
there love for anyone else? But like you can't talk about the best visual effects of the year and be like, yeah, but we're going to remove Avatar from that conversation. Well, why are you removing it? Well, because we're bored of it. Okay, I get
Right.
it, but like, it's still one of the best,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course, it's been winning basically all of the precursors. I think it's only missed like two nominations so far, so it's almost a foregone conclusion. Um, but let's jump to the other. Well, the film we've already set up before. The rest are all new for this category. Sinners, and so this was done by I talked about ILM. That's Industrial Light and Magic, and this yeah actually this was a complete, I've talked about with in the last category Kugler, the way he has people collaborate across all departments of a film, but he also has here for the VFX, it's a massive collaboration between all these different departments of studios. So you have ILM, but you also have all these smaller studios like Storm Studios, Rising Sun Pictures, Base FX, Barraboom Studios, Light VFX, and Outpost VFX, with Warner Brothers overseeing this all. But the nominated team themselves are Michael Ralla, Espen Nordahl, Guido Walter, and Donnie Dean. And this is the first nomination for all of them. And it's an international team from America, Norway, German, Australian, and another American. What did you think about Sinners on the VFX side of things?
So the biggest part of the VFX for this is the fact that we have two Michael B. Jordans occupying the screen. And it's so easy to forget about it because, when you get introduced to them, you go, okay, it's Michael B. Jordan twice. I get it. And then by the end of the film, you're like, wait, they're the same person? How does that work? I'm so confused. I'll say the show I'm currently working on does feature one actor playing twins. So I do have
Mm,
a bit of insight of sort of the complications of having to work around that. On days that we have to do twin shots, as we call it, they take the longest out of everything that we have to do.
hmm.
Often, what that entails is we sort of shoot the scene as normally, and then the actor that's playing the twin will sort of what we call will lock off the cameras, which means that if it's on a dolly or something like that, we put the brakes on, we don't move it. We use a repeatable head, which is a programmable head on the camera that will sort of repeat the same motions over and over again because it's computer based. So the timing is always perfect. He'll do that. He'll change. He'll come back. The cameras are still locked. They do it again. He's just now the other side of the twin. Now, the thing with a person playing two people is you now have to overlap the images, things like that. We
Mm-hmm.
often will remove props. So a lot of these scenes take place in sort of a conference room where they're having discussions. There's usually a mug in front of him or a pen and paper, things like that. They often get removed for visual effects purposes because that complicates things. In this movie, the hardest shot that Ryan Coogler said that he had to do was near the beginning of the film where
Mm-hmm.
one of the brothers passes a cigarette to the other brother. It sounds so simple and so
Mm-hmm.
innocuous, but that is so complicated. We purposely don't have them interact that way on set because of how complicated that is.
Yeah.
I think the most complicated we've done is one has thrown something to the other to catch it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely as a viewer in the audience. We talked about this a bit in our Sinners Deep Dive, Anthony and I, about the question of was it distracting to have Michael B. Jordan play two people in this movie? And that was the shot that we pointed to, where I don't think the average person is distracted by it because I think it is so seamless. And we should add there's the extra complication that the camera's rotating during this shot too. So they have to match
Mhm.
up all the lighting, and it's just a crazy thing they did by they put him in a halo rig with just you can find pictures of it online where there's just like lenses pointed at him all around him to capture the movement so they can really match these things up, and obviously there's a double involved too. But when just watching that as a viewer who has some knowledge of VFX, when I saw that shot in the beginning, it was like, oh, they're showing off. And I just found myself looking looking a lot to just see how they did that with the whole twin thing. And being impressed by the thing they did. But during my first watch, that was the most distracting thing to me as I kept looking for these interactions. uh, but it was very well done. And the other thing, I think, like a lot of the VFX for this movie blend into the background. For instance, maybe people don't realize that the train station scene, most of that is actually VFX. The train is entirely digital, is done by ILM. When I was talking about the driving shots with the cinematography, the cotton fields in the background are VFX done by Storm Studios. And with the cars driving through, done by Base VFX. So they did all this like collaboration because they were looking for groups of VFX artists outside the typical tax break hubs so that they thought like, oh well, if there's strikes or things like that, that these are people who can be more consistent providers.
Mm.
um and I'm just, yeah, very impressed at the way that Ryan Coogler in general gets people to work together. The other big VFX, of course, are like remix. Well, I said no spoilers. Let's say there's a big um, finale at the end where things go up in flames, and I actually we'll talk about, I suppose, the Lost Bus next, but I like the fire effects and like the surreal montage and that final moment that I was just talking about
Mhm.
better in this personally.
Oh, I'm on the same page for that. Yeah. The fire does look much more natural and realistic compared to the Lost Bus. And I think it almost has to do with they're not trying to make it as realistic as the Lost Bus is trying to do, which is,
Hmm.
when you're adding an element of creative license to the look, sometimes you can come up with a better product than just trying to make it as realistic as possible. And so I do agree. I think the fire in Sinners looks better than it does on the Lost Bus. And then of course you can't talk about VFX without talking about the impressive song sequence where the montage bit
Right.
where you've got all these different worlds colliding together and things like that, and the roof suddenly goes invisible, and we pull back, and
The lights
everything
on
is
fire.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's just everyone sort of dancing and all that sort of thing that's happening there. So this is a very impressive film with VFX.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and maybe obviously I have a sinner's bias. I'm very open about that, but this is low key my personal favorite in this category, just because it is so seamless and it just services making the world feel very real, rather than like look at the VFX over here, you know. So for me, I just really appreciate that about this film. The awards bodies appreciate it less in that regard. It's definitely hasn't gotten many wins, only two. Obviously, as we said, Avatar is dominating this. But let's switch over to The Lost Bus, which is a VFX only nom. It's a Paul Greengrass film about, inspired by a true story of survival. A determined father risks everything to rescue a dedicated teacher and her students from a raging wildfire. This was the done by Below X is the company. They also did like the new Mission Impossible and Ballerina and Lee Cronin's The Monkey, for example. But I'll say that Lorehounds will recognize their work from shows like The Gilded Age, The Acolyte, Wheel of Time, season 2 and 3. Now, season 3 has one of the best VFX episodes ever put to television. So lots of kudos for that. And The
Mm.
Last of Us season 1, I'll say. Um, but the actual nominees here are Charlie Noble, David Zaretti, Russell Bowen, and Brandon K. McLaughlin. These are mostly first nominations, but it is the second nomination for Noble. And this is a mostly British team. Bowen's British Canadian and McLaughlin is American, but they are based in the UK. What do you think of the Lost Bus as a movie, and what do you think of the VFX?
Um, I went in not wanting to really watch this film, and I left it in. It was fine.
Mm.
It was better, which means it was better than I expected it to be, because I expected it to be absolute crap, and it was fine. Um, it's sort of like a solid 2.5, 3-star movie. It's a very dad movie. It feels like. I don't know. It's a very Paul Greengrass with, the shaky camera, the heightened
Mm.
action, all that sort of stuff, which I kept forgetting that was directed by him before I watched it. And like as soon as I put it on, I was like, "Oh right, this is Paul Greengrass." I might feel nauseous afterwards with all the shaky cam, but it was fine. I don't know. I don't really buy Matthew McConaughey as a bus driver, a down on his
Mm.
luck bus driver, which I don't know, is a different conversation completely. But in terms of the VFX, it was very fine. I didn't think it stood out. I think it did it looked good. I wasn't, there's some terrific shots of what I imagined to be real fire enhanced by CGI that looked great. Oftentimes, I think it faltered when we were not looking outside, when we were looking at sort of reflections of fire, or like when the camera is directly on McConaughey driving, or the people inside the bus, the kids in the bus, things like that. I thought that's maybe where it faltered a little bit, where I didn't feel the heat and intensity so much as some of the great location shots. So that's sort of where I thought about it. We're like, this is a completely forgettable movie. Otherwise, I'm gonna forget that this was nominated in this category the day after the Oscars happened.
Yeah. For me, you are kinder to this film than I am. It's it just lost me with the dialogue and the writing and the opening, and then it was just hard for me to stay locked in throughout. It is one of my lowest rated films of the year overall, and the VFX didn't honestly do much for me either. Although I do appreciate, it's a mix of practical and CGI. They did a lot of research. I understand that. I just couldn't lock into this film, and the VFX weren't helping in that regard either. So I'm afraid I don't have that much to say about it. This is, to be honest, the one that I would replace with Tron Ares. But yeah, I'm trying to end on a positive note, but I didn't like this film.
No, that's completely fair. Like every year when we're death racing, there's, this is one of the categories where it features the most one-offs, and you're just like, okay, what sort of Hollywood slop am I going to have to sit through this year? And we've got two of them in this category, and this is one of them for sure. This is one of the movies that are nominated.
This is a movie. It's confirmed a movie. I sat
Yep.
through it.
Yep.
I mean, I like the cast. I'll say that. I like the cast. I wish they had been given a better script.
Yeah, I really like America Ferrera in this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so are you saying it's the other Hollywood slop movie, Jurassic World Rebirth?
How? What? Yes. Yes, I am.
I was like, well, I mean, to be honest, it could have been F1, but we'll get to F1 next. And so let's talk about Jurassic World Rebirth. This is a Gareth Edwards film. I'm on record as saying I love his visual aspect, his directing, not when he's involved in the writing. But anyway, this is about the visual side. This is about the VFX. So Jurassic World Rebirth is Jurassic Park number 7. I don't even know. 5 years after the events of Jurassic World Dominion, covert operations expert Zora Bennett is contracted to lead a skilled team on a top secret mission to secure genetic material from the world's 3 most massive dinosaurs. When Zora's operation intersects with a civilian facility whose boating expedition was capsized, they all find themselves stranded on an island where they come face to face with a sinister, shocking discovery that's been hidden from the world for decades. And to be honest, I picked up more background exposition from just reading that than I did from the setup of the
Yeah.
it is the only nomination here. It was a quasi surprise, which it shouldn't be because it is like impressive dinosaurs. This one is basically all Industrial Light and Magic ILM we've referred to before. This is, by the way, a division of Lucasfilm. But the nominees themselves are David Vickery, Stephen Aplin, Shermaine Chan, and Neil Corbold. This is a mostly British team, except for Chan is American. First nominations for Aplin and Chan. Second nomination for team leader Vickery after Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. And I think it's like, I was trying to count, I think it's like the 8th nomination for Corbold, who was he got just a fun stat in 2023. He got a rare trifecta of Best Visual Effects nominations, 3 nominations in a single year for his work on The Creator, another Gareth Edwards movie, Napoleon, and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. But that is the year that Godzilla -1, rightfully, in my opinion, won.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your
Oh,
thoughts on the film, on the VFX?
so I guess let's start here with the Gareth Edwards of it all. Like,
Mm-hmm.
can one man make such beautifully stunning movies and on the other hand make the dumbest movies possible? Like The Creator, easily
Yes.
one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen from a visual effects perspective, with one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've never walked out of a movie that was like, damn, that was impressive to watch, but I hated every second of
Yeah.
it.
We did a deep dive into The Creator. I'll link that in the show notes, but yeah, that's basically the summary. Is like, gosh, is this gorgeous and we love the world building, but like, can we get someone else to write the script?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a handful of directors where it's just like, please let someone else write your script. Please,
Yeah.
James Cameron, I'm looking at you too.
Uh-huh.
Please.
Yeah, the second episode in the row that James Cameron is called out for this.
Oh my god. Please get someone who can write some friggin' dialogue. Um with Jurassic movies, you know, we're here for the dinosaurs. That's what we're here
Mhm.
for. I will say this about this film. I cared far more about the humans in this story than I did about the dinosaurs, which is probably a first anyone will ever say about a Jurassic movie, you know, other than the original, which is about as flawless of a popcorn blockbuster type of movie that you can get. How is it possible that a movie that came out in 1992 has better dinosaur visual effects than a movie that came out in 2025? I don't know.
Mm. Mhm.
I didn't mind a lot of the human stuff, the stories. It was fine, mostly forgettable. I love ScarJo, so I'm pretty forgiving on
She was
her.
the best part, yeah.
But I thought these dinosaurs looked pretty terrible. Like that sequence when they're in the grass and they see the large dinosaurs and they go up and they're touching the legs and things like that. That was some of the worst CGI I've seen in a long time. What the hell was going on with these derpy looking dinosaurs? I don't know what they were doing. It made no sense to me. The look of them. like you have all the money in the world and this is what you guys come up with? I don't know.
Well,
So it
yeah.
was very frustrating.
So, to quote Vickery, the team lead, in an interview for the Art of VFX, our deadlines were so tight on this project. We had 30% less prep time, less time in prep, shoot, and post when compared to previous films I've worked on.
And there it is. That
Hmm.
that is always the downfall. Why do studios insist on making these big budget spectacles and then, the one thing they want to save money on is the spectacle part?
Right.
We're here to
Y-
see these over the top grandiose dinosaurs that we should be equally in awe and terrified of, and I was neither in awe or terrified of any of them.
And the thing is, like Gareth Edwards, the director, as we've said, he's great on the visual side, and he has more insight into VFX than most directors. So he takes a more hands-on approach with that. And we just talked about the creator, but also the first movie where he really broke out. What was it called? Monsters. Um, the one about like the kaiju's in Mexico,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah, which
Uh,
got him the Godzilla movie.
right, exactly. And he has shown that he can lead incredible VFX on a quite low budget. But I think here, like, it felt like there were a bunch of ideas that they were throwing at the wall. Like, so the big showpiece for this is meant to be this D Rex, a mutated T Rex. So they had it have a misshapen head. It can barely lift, bloated limbs, an extra set of long gorilla-like arms. And, they're like, it was extremely fun to bring to life. I'm like, I'm sure you had a great time, brainstorming this animal. Unfortunately, it was neither visually nor story wise tied into the rest of the movie well. I think that was my biggest problem with these is not the VFX effects themselves. They just felt pasted into the environments. Like I never believed they existed in the same space as the actors.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and like the movie starts off feeling like a horror movie. I quite enjoyed that opening sequence, and I was really hoping that they would continue that feeling, and it didn't go there at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say that for me, the most impressive stuff was the water simulations. I know that that can be difficult to do, and I actually kind of forgot how much of the water was simulated while they were in those water scenes.
Mhm.
So for me, that was the greatest success. But not surprisingly, this really only has like one other nomination for the Visual Effects Society Award, which it obviously didn't win. And yeah, it was kind of a surprise that it turned up here.
Yeah, every year there's always one or two films in this category that like you're trying to predict the nominations, and you have to like pick some Hollywood slop. And this is the one that I was not surprised really. I did a Oscar predictions episode with Paulo before the nominations came out, and I was like, no, Rebirth is going to get nominated, uh, just because it feels incredibly on brand for the Academy of like we can't have all good nominations. We got to include some that suck.
I mean, I'm mad about like this alleged superhero fatigue, knocking out some movies I feel like were more deserving. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay, question: did you expect F1 to show up in this category?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also really like this film too.
Okay. So, okay, to set it up, this is Joseph Kosinski film. It's about racing legend Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt, is coaxed out of retirement to lead a struggling Formula One team and mentor a young hotshot driver, Damson Idris, while chasing one more chance at glory. This received 4 nominations this year, including a surprise Best Picture nomination, although I did predict that. And then also we'll talk about it in 3 categories today: visual effects, editing, and sound. And it did expect to do well on the technical side. This is a Frame Store. Yeah, so Frame Store is the biggest VFX studio in Europe, based in London, and the actual nominees are Ryan Tudhope, Nicholas Chevalier, Robert Harrington, and Keith Dawson. It's a combination of American, French, New Zealand, Canadian, and British team. First nominations for most except Tudhope the lead. This is his second nomination after Top Gun Maverick, which was directed by the same director. And he also, by the way, is a co-founder of the visual effects studio Atomic Fiction. So why do you think F1 deserves to be in this category?
I'll start with, Top Gun Maverick. And the biggest disservice I feel like they did while marketing that movie was, you know, talking about how much the cast, specifically Tom Cruise, did their own flying and how it's all real flying, all real flying. Fantastic. None of those jets were real.
Hmm.
Um, and it's sort of like Christopher Nolan being like, and we don't use any special effects in my movie or any visual effects in
Right.
my movies. And it's like, Chris, you're lying. You're lying. Like, don't do this. Like, talk about how seamless you do these visual effects, how great you can integrate it, and how naturalistic you can do it. And Top Gun Maverick looked fantastic. The jets, not real. None of that is real. They're not
Hmm.
really flying through canyons. I don't even think the canyons were real. Um, and this is sort of similar where, you know, they hyped up how they filmed on real racetracks using real racers, all that sort of stuff. And I think it looks fantastic. But you know what? A lot of those cars aren't real as well. And I really wish that they were more honest with the marketing and of like, look how much we were able to integrate the real racing with our CGI. Can you tell the difference, viewer? No, you can't. That's how good it is. Um, and so that's why I really appreciate it because it does look pretty seamless. There's some great shots in here. And I know a lot of the VFX went to changing cars that obviously have their own sponsors and color and all this sort of stuff to match what is approved for the film to look like the different drivers. Um, so that's a big portion of where the VFX went. And obviously, there's some crazy shots. They did have cameras on the cars themselves, very small cameras, but not all of that they were able to do. And so some of the racing bits were fully CGI, and I think they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, and things like they couldn't shoot on at Monza when they wanted to, so they would uh they would sub in, the different background. And to be honest, I did not notice these things while watching. So I do feel like, yeah, this is a very seamless visual effects that just make it, yeah, as I was praising others for, just making it feel real, making you feel submersed in that environment. And I'll say like this, it's not my favorite movie. It's not my least favorite movie. It's very much a dad movie, as you said about
Mhm.
The Lost Bus, but I think this is a much better dad movie than that one. Um, so I'm perfectly happy to see it here. It hasn't taken any wins yet, but again, that's because Avatar has been dominating everything. Um, I mean, do we both think Avatar definitely is going to win? And which would you choose of these five to win?
Yeah, it definitely feels like a foregone conclusion that's Avatar Fire and Ash. That's probably one of the easiest categories to predict. In terms of my favorites of this category, it's kind of a toss up between Sinners and F1. Probably I'll lean to Sinners as being better, but I do quite appreciate what they're doing in F1.
Hmm. I'll say this category does have a short list of 10. So the rest of the short list was The Electric State, Frankenstein, Superman, Tron, Ares, and Wicked for Good. And I would put most of those up there above a couple that are on this list. But most especially, I've already talked about Tron, Ares. I'll talk about The Electric State looked phenomenal.
Hmm. Yeah, I fully expected that movie to get nominated here because that is the type of film that we often get here, where it's like bottom of the barrel, 2% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's got great visual effects.
I mean, I liked it as a film better than, say, The Lost Bus. So
Fair, fair. I'm just happy Frankenstein didn't get nominated.
okay, well, all right. As I said, the Production Design Awards is where Frankenstein is dominating and where I think it deserves to dominate. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, just Superman. Obviously, was a big fan of that. Predator: Badlands. I thought that
Mm.
maybe it had a real shot here. Thunderbolts would have been kind of an unexpected but inspired pick, just with things like, how they did that Void stuff with the blackout people.
Mhm.
Um, I might have thought Fantastic Four First Steps would have been here in a different year, with especially the first Galactus intro, even though I didn't love everything about the VFX in that film. I don't know. Are there any others you expected to see in this category?
I agree with you with Thunderbolts. That was one that I was kind of rooting for in terms of, there's no superhero movies this year. That is shocking.
Mhm,
There's always a
mhm.
superhero movie. So that was the one I was hoping for. But Warfare was one, when they would do the show of force and the jet plane would fly overhead and there'd be a cloud of smoke, or not, a cloud of dust would fill up the screen. I thought they did a great job with that. And then in terms of creature designs, I really like Mickey 17.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A more inspired pick than Jurassic World Rebirth.
I agree, I agree. Mickey 17 was looked phenomenal. Yeah. All right. Let's take a quick break here. When we come back, we're gonna talk about the other 2 categories. Be right back. All right, let's talk about film editing and sound, starting with film editing. This, we before we get into the film editing itself, we have to talk about the historic association with Best Picture winners. This is 36 years out of the 97 that the Oscars has been in existence, which doesn't include this year, by the way. The film that won achievement in film editing also won Best Picture. So there's no, I mean, I suppose they say you make the film in the editing room, so that makes sense to a certain degree, but it just almost feels like this crazy correlation.
Mhm.
There's the longest streak of this happening was 7 years in a row, from 1956 with Around the World in 80 Days to 1962 with Lawrence of Arabia. But for 33 consecutive years between 1981 and 2013, every Best Picture winner had also been nominated in film editing, and two-thirds also won for film editing. And this, yeah, we've seen in the past 3 years, this is definitely happening again with Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning both in 2022, which I think was one of the most inspired and best film editing wins ever. 2023, Oppenheimer, and last year's Anora also followed this trend. Do we think this is going to happen this year as well?
Um, Probably, probably. Yeah, I don't know. It's so tough because I don't know where the F1 of it all sort of sits.
Hmm.
I think one battle after another is probably gonna win, but, like, I can maybe see F1 sneaking this one too.
All right, so let's set it up. The 5 nominees are F1, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, Sentimental Value, and Sinners. Let's start with F1, where the editor was Stephen Mirioni, an American. This is his 4th nomination, and he did win for Traffic in 2000. Um, and yeah, what do you think makes? I mean, F1 is definitely one of the front runners in this category, but definitely not a front runner for Best Picture. What do you think makes it a front runner for editing?
The the just the race sequences, I think,
Hmm.
are edited so seamlessly, oftentimes in big action movies, things like that. A big complaint can be you don't know what action is happening off screen or where you are exactly positionally related. And during these race sequences in F1, you always knew where the drivers were positioned and you always sort of knew how the race was shaking out in terms of the other competitors, which is not an easy thing to do in terms of keeping track of all that in a way of not thinking about it. That should be back of your mind. That should not be you should not be thinking about, like, how is this race going? Are they in first right now? Are they close to the front? I don't understand. If you're thinking about that, bad editing. Uh
Hmm.
and so often the case with editing is it's not supposed to be noticeable.
Right.
Sometimes it can be a little bit flashy and you'll notice it, and for fight sequences, things like that, and you'll really be able to appreciate it. But oftentimes, great editing, you're not going to notice it at all unless you're an expert at that category, which I won't say that I am by any means, but, like, if you can go back later and be like, oh yeah, I always knew where the cars were that we were supposed to be following. I knew where they were and what they were doing. It was a sign of good editing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll say, like, I'm not a huge fan of the script for this film. I find it a bit paint by numbers, but they do, with the editing, balance what is going on with the character drama well with the racing, so that because for someone for me like me, I'm not necessarily as enthralled with the racing as some other people might be, and so peppering in, you know, the tying it to the character drama, that is what keeps me enthralled. And I have to say, it is the editing that draws those lines and makes me be like, oh, but where is Brad Pitt in the standings? Where is, you know,
Mhm.
Danton Idris? um yeah, so I think this is a phenomenally well edited movie, and I wouldn't begrudge its win at all. It has won the Critics' Choice and one other award. It lost BAFTAs to One Battle After Another, so I think things may be going that direction. So let's jump to One Battle After Another, where the editor was Andy Jurgensen, an American, or so maybe it's pronounced Jurgensen. Um, Third, Paul Thomas Anderson collaboration with the second as lead editor, but first Oscar nomination. Why do you think this one is such a frontrunner other than the general film's frontrunner status?
I think that definitely helps. As you were saying with the stats, you know, we're one third of the Best Picture winners also won Best Editing. Two thirds of the total Best Picture winners have at least a nomination. It just seems to go hand in hand. The pacing for me in this movie never felt slow. You know, it really felt like it was go, 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 go. Even in the quieter, more intimate moments, I never felt like we were losing steam or like, okay, this is the moment of respite. This is where we as an audience catch our breath because the character is catching their breath. No, it felt like it was nonstop. You know, there for me, I think of the sequence where Bob is on the phone trying to get the information when he's in Benicio del Toro's apartment. And just the intensity I felt in that moment, I thought was great editing for that. Not to mention, you know, we've already talked about the car chase scene and all that great stuff. Where I think that's obviously the highlight of this film in terms of the editing combined with,
Hmm.
you know, the cinematography and everything like that, being able to go back and forth between all these the three cars that are racing up and down these hills. I think it just looks beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what stands out to me the most. I don't always love the editing of this film in terms of the decisions that were made about the coherence and longevity of the story, I'll say. Just those are my general, I mean, that comes down more, I suppose, to what's coming from the direction and the writing. But in terms of like the intra-scene editing, you know, the things like you're saying about the car race, about these action moments, that is all exceptionally well done for sure.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's definitely when it comes to precursors, it's won 11, been honored 4 times. It did also win, as we said, the BAFTAs. It's up to for 3 more awards. It does seem to be the front runner here. Yeah, after seeing like the precursors, I'm like, yeah, I think it's One Battle After Another. We'll see if that also means that it will be a Best Picture winner. But between the other three, Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, and Sinners, what do you think is in third place?
That's tough. Probably Sinners by virtue of the fact that it's, you know, pretty close to being a co Best Picture front runner.
Hmm.
Um, Although I do really like the editing in Marty Supreme as well. For me, my favorite kind of editing is when tension is being built. In Marty Supreme, you know, that whole movie is tension, and so I think it works really well. So on a personal level, I would probably say Marty Supreme, but on a logical level, my brain says it might be Sinners.
Okay. I mean, I unsurprisingly lean toward Sinners here, but let's dive into Marty Supreme since you brought it up.
Sure.
The editors here are Ronald Bronstein and Josh Safdie, the director himself. Um, and Bronstein, this is his first and second and third nominations because he is best known as being a co-writer and co-editor on the films with the Safdies, Good Time and Uncut Gems, and now Marty Supreme. It's interesting to me that so we've been talking a lot about Uncut Gems as being like the quintessential Safdie brothers movie. And now they've split up and done their own things where Josh did Marty Supreme and his brother did The Smashing Machine. And it feels like to me, maybe that Ronald Bronstein is actually the real second Safdie brother because Marty Supreme is the successor to Uncut Gems much more than The Smashing Machine is to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely what it seems like. Bronstein seems to be the one that is bringing this manic energy, especially so with it's weird. You obviously who someone is married to does not indicate who they are or vice versa or anything like that. But like I recently watched If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which
Mm-hmm.
was written and directed by Ron Bronstein's wife, Mary Bronstein. And that feels like it could be a Safdie movie, frankly. um,
It's true. Very stressful,
yeah, it's very,
but
very
good. Yeah.
stressful. Yes. Like, I could see Robert Pattinson playing that character or Adam Sandler playing that character or now Timothy Chalamet playing that character. Like that's how much it feels like, oh, okay, it's the Bronstein household that has this manic energy, which concerns me a little bit. I don't know if they have children or not, but like, do we need to do a welfare check? I don't know. Or is it one of those things where it's like the same people that like make the most insane horror movies are the most, well-adjusted normal people? I think of someone like David Cronenberg,
Right.
how
You
messed up
get it
his
out
movies.
elsewhere. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. What are the Bronsteins really like? But yeah, no, it really does feel like Ronald Bronstein is the secret ingredient to making the Safdie movies work. And the fact that he did not work on The Smashing Machine, and that movie, in my opinion, was a complete flop and awful, shows that he might be the one that has it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do. I actually like Marty Supreme. I mean, I like it in general better than One Battle After Another. That's fine. I'm not keeping that a secret. But I do particularly like the editing here, and I think it is because of the mix of those high paced ping pong sequences. Like they make me so enthralled in the ping pong matches, but also we have like the bigger montages like that Globetrotters tour
Mhm.
montage. I just think this is a film that yeah, that stressful high pace that the Safdie movies, or maybe we should say the Bronstein movies, are really known for, is driven by the editing.
Yeah. Which at this point, how long is it going to be until Ronald Bronstein directs his own movie?
Yeah, sorry, Josh Safdie. Especially after Josh Safdie's in some hot water this season over past actions we referred to in a previous episode about things that took place on his set
Mhm.
regarding not protecting underage actresses. So yeah, we'll see. I would love to see Ronald and Mary do a movie together, and maybe that wouldn't be good for their marriage.
Maybe that's why they
but,
don't work together. Yeah.
but I would love to see what came out of that.
Yes. Yeah.
This one, it's won a couple of minor awards, but it's yeah, as we said, it's definitely not considered one of the front runners. Let's switch to one of my favorites in the category. It may be my favorite overall. Obviously, my favorite film overall, Sinners, where the editor is Michael P. Shawver. And this is his first nomination. He's an American, but his fifth Ryan Coogler collaboration. Also worked on Abigail and Quiet Place too, so like very much knows horror. And also worked as an additional editor on Better Man, and I just think everyone who worked on the film Better Man is brilliant. And yes, it's not this year's film, but I will never stop talking about Better Man. Um,
And
well,
nor should you.
exactly. It's just delivering everything on top level, like Sinners. Um, but yeah, I think for me, Sinners with the and I know other people disagree, but for me, it was a great feat in good pacing. And they, I've read a lot of interviews where they've talked about things like how they had to set up the expectations in the opening. So, like, they kind of switched around the order of events so that they could set it up as a horror movie, but still give you that time the characters could just live in this day, so that later when a character says that was the best day of my life before all that happened, you feel it, it really comes, and like it all punches you together in the end because of the way the editing laid out the pacing and pointed you toward this final moment. What do you think about Sinners editing overall?
I really liked it too. There are some fantastic sequences in this, especially we talk about ad nauseum, but the main musical sequence I think is just absolutely stunning in the way that is put together, because that could have easily been something that maybe felt a little forced, and it doesn't. And so I think that's a bit of a testament to the editing there. Um, I did feel the length of this movie a little bit toward in the final act, especially the sort of the coda, the epilogue. I didn't really care for, but that's definitely more of a me thing, I think. I don't know. It doesn't have as noticeable editing compared to, in my opinion, One Battle or Marty Supreme, or even F1. So it's a bit lower on my own personal list. Once again, not because it's a bad movie by any sort, but it's definitely just isn't as flashy as the others.
Yeah, and as I've been talking about, I like this blending in, but I definitely have a deeper appreciation of this one just because I love the film so much overall. I've done so much intense diving into all the aspects of its filmmaking. 20 to 30% of test audiences told them to take out the surreal montage. Thank God they didn't listen to that. But I just love like the more subtle things they do with the editing, like how they'll do a long shot to let you settle into a scene, and the way it edits to closer and closer cuts of the characters as you get to know them. They used everything they could to differentiate the two twins. So you'll find like quicker cuts with the jovial Stack character and longer cuts with the more pensive Smoke character. Um, and they had to make a lot of hard decisions, like with there was a version of the film that had the church scene at the end and the final shootout cut through each other, and they decided not to do that, which I think was the right thing to do. Just but also things like the seamless oneer of that, that requires some very subtle editing to make these oneers that have actual cuts work as if they don't have actual cuts.
Mhm.
But just I think also I really respond to combinations of editing that I haven't seen before. So one of my favorite sequences in the film is when I mentioned it earlier, when Lee Jun Lee walks back and forth between the shops, and it's a oneer following her that whole time, but you're actually listening to a conversation between two other characters that's setting up. It's doesn't feel like important information at the time. There's talking about a gambling kerfuffle, but it sets up things that happen later in the film. Um, yeah, and just like yeah, it comes down to taste for sure because I did not feel the length of this film at all. Any of the four times that I watched it. So um, and I think editing in general is something we'll talk about, especially with sentimental value. It really comes down to taste. Like you need just a certain intuition that I'm not sure can be clearly taught to do it well, and then there's going to be people who respond to your particular taste, and then people who respond better to other people's particular taste.
Yeah. No, I think that's the best way of putting it.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's not a front runner in this category, but it remains a front runner in my heart. Um, since I mentioned it, yeah, let's talk about. Well, I guess it's the last one in the category. Sentimental value. This is. We haven't talked about this yet. This episode. So this is Joachim Trier. The plot is sisters Nora and Agnes reunite with their estranged father, the charismatic Gustav, a once renowned director who offers stage actress Nora a role in what he hopes will be his comeback film. When Nora turns it down, she soon discovers he has given her part to an eager young Hollywood star. And this has been nominated 9 times. We talked about it in Best Picture Preview and in the international episode. today in editing. Also, it'll be talked about in director, original screenplay, actress, supporting actor, and supporting actress times two. And the editor is Olivier Bouge Coutet, or maybe, yeah, I'm pronouncing it the French way because it looks French, although he is Danish. And this is his first nomination, although he did edit Thelma, which is a film that I have an affection for, and The Apprentice, which I have less affection for. And this is his sixth collaboration with Trier. Would you think about sentimental value as a film and the editing aspect of it?
I adore this film. I thought it was absolutely stunningly beautiful. I cried multiple times in it. I love Joachim Trier. I thought this was one of my favorite movies of the year. That said, in terms of the actual editing, I'm a bit surprised that it's here. I think it got swept up with the love of this film overall, and that it's one of the best picture contenders in terms of like the top half that have a chance to win, and I think it maybe allowed it to get a nomination here. I wouldn't have necessarily put it here. That said, comparing to what we were talking about with stuff like F1 and Marty Supreme with quick cuts and tension building and all this sort of stuff, I think the opposite is true for this movie, where the tension is able to be built by the lack of cuts, where
Mm-hmm.
we don't know how long a shot is going to hold on someone's face. And that can make people feel uncomfortable, where you're just staring at someone's own discomfort on screen for a long period of time. And you're wondering when it will end. And that also adds tension to us. So yeah, I think the editing in this is perfectly acceptable for what this film needs. I think it does a great job. It's neither in your face or questionable at any times. It could have gone to a more flashy film. Not that that's a bad thing that it's here, but I could have seen another film sneaking in instead of sentimental value.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a surprise to them as well. It only got one other nomination in this category at the Oscar Film Awards, which it didn't win. And you could see the sentimental value team, they released a reaction video to the Oscar nominations. And this award, when it was announced, got the biggest reaction from them. I think in part because they didn't expect it, and also in part perhaps because it was a signal that they were going to get a Best Picture nomination, which
Mhm.
followed that. It is very much, it's not a flashy one. It's very much um, it's a recognition of thoughtful decision making when it comes to editing. With having to cut your darlings. Like apparently, he cut down a 26-minute sequence when Gustav goes to France down to 10 minutes, that is one of my favorite sequences. But I also understand, he said you can't stay away from Nora that long, so it's a lot of decisions like that, and also just working with the idiosyncrasies of Joachim Trier. Like Trier loves these voiceover driven montages, and so that takes some extra editing to keep it visually interesting while that's going on, to keep you engaged, and decisions like where to cut and leave space for the brain to fill in the action in between, as a trick to keep the audience more engaged with what is pretty much a talkier film. So yeah, and also, I like listening to Kute talk about how his naturalistic take, where Joachim will take a few takes from a bunch of different angles, but he really tries to he doesn't want to cut away from, he doesn't want to do ADR. He doesn't want to combine takes because he says you can feel it. He wants it all to feel very real. And I think that's one of the things that sold the movie. So I understand the nomination, but yeah, let me ask you, what would you have nominated instead in this category?
I was a big fan of Black Bag, the Steven Soderbergh movie.
Okay.
So that would be one. I really like the editing in that. I think that especially the two big centerpiece dinner conversations were terrific for that. Or maybe even something like Wake Up Dead Man. I really love the sort of twisty turny nature of those films. I love the Knives Out movies. So that would have been one that I really liked because I thought it was fun. It was a good time with the editing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have 28 years later here. I think I've talked about it in the BAFTAs episode, but the editing is one of the things that blew me away in that film, just in terms of the way it drew together the cinematography and editing of the original films, but making it something new and pushing boundaries. So that really worked for me. I thought that Good Boy this year, the dog horror film, was another feat of editing. Just because basically, the dog keeps getting honored for the dog's performance in the film, but that's basically all a trick of editing. So I have to really point that one out. And I also loved the Indonesian film Sore, Wife from the Future. It's a time loop film, and time loop films require a certain type of editing. And as a connoisseur of time loop films, I'll say that one did it particularly well. There's no short list in this category, but of the five that were edited, which do you think One Battle has it, or do you think F1 is equal frontrunner status?
This is one that I'm very back and forth about, where I'm not totally sure where I land on. I think in the end, One Battle will end up getting it because I think they are going to be the big winner of the night. And this is a category that they're going to be able to pick up. But it also wouldn't surprise me if F1 does end up winning it. I think it would be quite the surprise. And it would mean that like F1 is going to be a big winner in their own right with sound editing, with best sound as well. But yeah, I do think it's probably going to be One Battle. That's what I'm putting on my own personal
Yeah.
ballot.
And what would you pick if it were up to you?
Probably. This is tough. Yeah, I'm gonna go outside the box and say F1.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably going to be One Battle, just guided by when I was going through the precursors. I was like, God damn, it's really been racking them up. My personal pick would be Sinners, though, but it ain't gonna happen in this category. I doubt it. I doubt it. If Sinners wins this category, then my prediction is it's definitely winning Best Picture after that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah. Whereas if One Battle wins this category, there's still a shot for Sinners to take Best Picture.
I agree with that too. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the final category, sound, which the nominees are F1, Frankenstein, One Battle After Another, Sinners, and Surat. So only one new one we haven't talked about, but let's jump back in with F1. Definitely one of the two favorites in this category, where the nominees are Al Nelson, Gwendolyn Yates Whittle, Gary Rizzo, or Rizzo, anyway, Juan Peralta and Gareth John. These are working at Skywalker Sound, which, as the name implies, is also part of Lucasfilm. Um, and it's an all American team except for Gareth John, who's British. And for most of them, it's a second or later nom. Nelson, the team lead, second nomination after winning for Top Gun Maverick. Again, F1, same directors, Top Gun Maverick. We have people who've worked on the Tron movies, Avatar movies, Nolan movies, Dune Part 2. The biggest winner, like the one who has racked up the most nominations, is Gary. I don't know if it's Rizzo or Rizzo. I'm leaning Italian. Let's go Rizzo. Who has 8 nominations and won twice for Inception and Dunkirk. Yeah, I mean, obviously, sound, vroom, vroom. What do you think is blowing people away about the F1 sound?
I mean, I think it's as simple as that. This is a category that is traditionally dominated by war films or films that feature large battle sequences, things like that. And we don't have that this year. There was no real big war movie at all, and so the fact that we don't have that as a front runner, honestly, I could have seen Avatar being here because that's probably was the closest to being sort of that prestige war type movie, and they didn't get a nomination, which was a little surprising to me. So the next closest thing that they love after big action scenes is vehicles that make a lot of noise, and F1 has a lot of vehicles that make a lot of noise. So it's as simple as the vroom vroom of it all. And I think they did a great job. I love the way this movie sounds. I went to a NASCAR race for the first time in my life last year. Went traveled down to Mexico, and wow, like just hearing a pack of cars zoom by you is one of the most exhilarating things that I have ever heard in my life. And I think F1 did a great job recreating that. So much so that was really cool that there's a bit in the movie where we get a montage of all the different races, and the racetrack that I went to in Mexico makes a brief appearance in F1, which I thought was
Oh,
very fun. Yeah.
I was excited that there's a Dutch driver who Marks Verstappen who I just know his name because they constantly talk about him on the news and in this movie I was like, "Oh, he's important internationally because they keep talking about him here too."
Yeah. So as I've learned from you, the Dutch don't like to promote themselves.
Well, I mean, I just don't know much about. I used to like in college. I dated someone who was really into F1, and so I learned a lot about it then. But since after we broke up, I was like, "And F1 out of my brain, done." So I don't know much about this world. So it was that aspect of this film was fun for me, and obviously, yeah, the sound design I understand. I would say it's the front runner here at one. I've noticed when I was going through precursors there are not as many awards for sound as there are for a lot of the other categories. But F1 did win Critics' Choice. It did win BAFTAs. So it's probably the front runner here. But do you agree that maybe the second dark horse is Surat?
I would hope so. Like Seurat sort of feels like Train Dreams in cinematography, where it's like, no, this is the inspired pick here.
Right.
Unfortunately, unlike Train Dreams, Seurat just is having no buzz around it. Where it's one of those movies where, like, if you see it, you get it, but it kind of feels like a lot of people have not seen it.
Yeah. So to set this one up, since we haven't talked about it in this episode yet, we did talk about it in the international episode because it has two nominations, international and sound. It's an Oliver Locke's film about a man and his son who arrive at a rave lost in the mountains of Morocco. They are looking for Marina, their daughter and sister, who disappeared months ago at another rave. Driven by fate, they decide to follow a group of ravers in search of one last party in hopes Marina will be there. And the team nominated is Amanda Vieja, Laila Casanovas, and Yasmina Praderas. And they're all Spanish first nominations. And we should say the first all woman sound team to be nominated here, which you would hope that story would get more traction to help them. But I think the real reason why people are excited about this movie and the sound, whatever you think about the film, everyone I've spoken to is like, but watch it in the theater because of the sound. And I guess that has a lot to do with the rave, but also with the engines of the vehicles in the caravan. What are your feelings about the film overall and the sound?
I love this movie. It was terrific. I did not know that stat about it was the first all woman team to be nominated here, which awesome. I'm so excited to hear that. I wish they were making a bigger deal of that. Unfortunately,
Right.
I think it's a side product of no one seems to be talking about this movie, so they can't talk about that if they're not talking about the movie. The sound is incredible. I almost feel like not going to spoil this movie at all. It's definitely good to go into this movie blind. Um, I almost think that it's being overshadowed by some moments in this film that are unexpected.
Hmm.
That ends up becoming the talking point rather than the terrific sound design of this movie. Because you're
Right.
right, everyone does come out raving about the sound design, but I think more so it's like, oh my god, X moment, Y moment, Z
Right.
moment. Not going to say them.
Which involve a lot of sound design for those moments, I'll say.
100%. But especially the first big moment, I think it's just like, oh, it's this type of movie. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say there's also like there's a scene where there's just a random conversation as they're because there's my favorite moments of this movie are not those later moments which are maybe get a little nihilistic for me, but where they just are chilling and having conversations, and they even have an entire conversation about sound design within the movie, where
They-
they're kind of communicating the sound team's philosophy about this. about this, like wanting this distortion and grainy sound texture, like textured sound, basically. So yeah, I agree. This would be the inspired pick here. I don't love the movie as much as you do because of the other things we talked about, but I would. This would be my pick to win in this category. I wish they would win here. It's done well at European Film Awards. That is not a huge set. I mean, it's a sizable, obviously, contingency in the Academy, but I think that the American contingency is going to go with F1, whereas the Europeans are like, no, don't forget Sarah.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way.
Yeah. What do you think would be third place between Frankenstein, One Battle, and Sinners?
I would probably say Sinners because, on top of the traditional action movies that they like, they also like movies that feature music and
Hmm.
live music and things like that, which is why, the first Wicked movie did so great in this category last year when it came out because the big thing about that was all recorded live. Sinners was not recorded live as far as I am aware, but
It was actually, a lot of it was,
oh,
yeah.
oh,
Hmm.
fantastic. Okay, yeah. Then that's probably why. It's sort of tough when a movie is great on so many different technical levels. Only so many stories can kind of come to the forefront. Because and then you just end up muddying the waters a little bit. And so I've not heard a bunch of discussion about the Sinners sound and the music specifically,
Hmm.
other than the songs. The songs themselves are getting a lot of attention. But yeah, I thought, the music sounded terrific. There were some incredible numbers. You think of the first time we see Preacher Boy singing in the car and just like how powerful his voice is.
Oh, yeah.
That's that's part of the sound design is just
Yeah.
how good he sounds there.
Yeah, I think Michael B. Jordan and I both went "woo" at the same time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I literally made that sound out loud in the theater the first time I saw it. Um, so I'll say on the sound side, this is another Skywalker Sound project, and the nominees are Chris Welker, Benjamin A. Burt, Felipe Pacheco, Brandon Proctor, and Steve Bodecker. All American team except Pacheco, who's Costa Rican American. And it is the first nomination for Welker and Pacheco, second nomination for Burt and Proctor after Black Panther. And I should say that Benjamin A. Burt is the son of Ben Burt, who is famous for inventing the Wilhelm scream and other Star Wars sound effects like Vader breathing and R2D2, etc. So
Mhm. Yeah,
Skywalker sound alumni. um,
100%. Ben Burt is probably the most famous sound designer ever. And so he obviously learned from the best watching his dad and probably knew how to be a better sound designer than most people did by the time he was like 5 years old.
right. Although the most awarded on this team is Boudicca, who this is his fourth nomination after All Is Lost in both Black Panther films. So you can see, obviously, Ryan Coogler likes to, he finds people he likes to work with and then he likes to keep working with them, which honestly makes sense to me. But yeah, as far as you talked about the musical aspect, one other thing that I'll shout out is just the way that they use sound design to sort of define the moving back and forth between the real world and this more supernatural world. So pay particular attention to, for example, the scenes around Annie, who is the one who's most connected with like the hoodoo side of things, and obviously scenes around the vampires as well, and how they play with like the resonances and things there too, and also visually they play with this as well to suggest this loosening of bonds with the concrete physical world. So I appreciate that as well.
Hmm. No, yeah, it does a great job with all of that.
And it has won some awards like the Astro Film Awards and some others. Yeah, it's though probably, behind, obviously, as we said, the other two. I guess I would say the next in line after this would be One Battle, which is another pew pew film. With mixed with that, like they mix the sound effects with that frenetic score, and By they, I mean more Skywalker sound. With the nominees are Jose Antonio Garcia, Christopher Scarabozio, and Tony Villaflor. Um, and the Garcia is Mexican. The other two are American. It is the first nomination for Villaflor, third nomination for the other two. Garcia was nominated previously for Argo and Roma, and Scarabozio for Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and Rogue One. So yeah, Skywalker alumni again. Well, yeah. What are your thoughts on the one battle sound?
I think it does sound great. This is probably the most actiony movie of the group, in terms of using guns and things like that. Uh, but yeah, it feels like this is, I mentioned it earlier with other categories. It feels like this might be one where the one battle love got swept up into here. Where
Hmm.
if it didn't get a nomination here, I wouldn't have been terribly upset. It's perfectly good sound, but it's not the one that I would have predicted to be here for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in another year it might have even been a front runner just because, there is a lot of sound going on. We'll say a lot of guns and explosions and things like that. Um, but it is definitely not getting as much attention as the other nominees, and I think that's perfectly fair. Um, Let me guess, your fifth ranked on this one is Frankenstein?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay, Frankenstein. It's a group of small Canadian studios that did this, and the team nominated is Greg Chapman, Nathan Robitaille, Nelson Ferreira, Christian Cook, and Brad Zorn. This is the first or second nomination for all of them. Those who for whom it's a second nomination worked also with Del Toro on The Shape of Water. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the sound in Frankenstein? Why do you think it's not as up with the others?
I don't know. It just was not a very noticeable aspect for me altogether. There's some interesting stuff with like the ice cracking when the ship is stuck at the beginning. I thought that was fine and interesting enough, but like this is not a movie that relies on its sound design to tell its story compared to, I would say, the other four movies. Like, while I said one battle after another, didn't was a bit of a surprising nomination. There's quite a bit of gun sounds and action and that sort of stuff that makes sense of why it's here. Frankenstein, I'm a bit confused about why it's here. It's perfectly fine, but like it just doesn't stand out in the same way for me at all.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they would point to the sound mixing of, there's natures like with animals and the Arctic ice cracking sort of things, but also especially with the creature roars and things like that. But I feel like Frankenstein, it was like people were like, we want to reward Del Toro for making his dream movie he's been wanting to make for 20 years. And where should we do it? Well, we should do it in all the below the line categories, especially. And as I've said, I think that's very deserving on the production design things side of things, particularly costume design, which I hope Kate Hawley does win. I think she will. Um, but yeah, maybe this just slid under like, oh, we're rewarding this movie for technical stuff, right? Right? Put it in sound.
100%. It definitely feels like it got swept up with all the technical love.
Yeah. So what's your final prediction for who's going to win and your favorite of these five?
I think F1 is the one that is the front runner to win this. I think it's going to walk away pretty easily, and I would also say that's probably my favorite too. Surratt does have some excellent design, but it really is sort of picking and choosing its moments. Whereas F1, it sort of feels like the backbone of the movie is the sound design.
I understand that. Yeah. I mean, I don't begrudge F1 will probably win. My personal favorite, I would be excited to see Surratt win, just as you said, it's a more inspired choice, and that's usually what I go for. But yeah, I think it's going to be F1. I'll say this is a category with a short list of 10 total. So the other five were Avatar, Fire and Ash, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, Springsteen, Deliver Me from Nowhere, Superman, and Wicked for Good. And yeah, I mean, I think Wicked for Good should be in there, to be honest. But I think, as we said, it was suffering from the sequelitis of like, well, what new thing did you do?
Mhm.
I think Superman. I hate that Superman's not nominated for anything. I would like to see it there. And yeah, you can see it's a mix of, as we'd expect, the technical spectacles and musical like Springsteen "Deliver Me from Nowhere."
Yeah, I'm quite surprised Wicked for Good didn't get here as well. That's definitely a surprise, for sure. For me, you mentioned it earlier. Predator Badlands would have been awesome if it was here. Warfare was
Yeah,
one that I would also have loved to see get here.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that there has been an issue of them, just kind of like, here are the films that are nominated for everything. Let's slot them into these categories. And so I would like to see more inspired picks like Sarat in the future. I like that they're doing the bake-offs with certain categories privately. We were talking about it in the production design episode that Lisa and I would love to see. Like, I wish they would share that with us. Um, But yeah, I hope that we see more inspired picks in the future, like we saw in makeup and hair this year, for example.
That would be nice.
And so, how's the rest of your death race going? Do you have any overall favorites or predictions?
I mean, my favorite of the year was One Battle After Another, so I'm happy that it got so many nominations. In terms of what I'm still missing, I'm very excited to watch both The Ugly Stepsister and Kokuo.
Hmm.
Those are probably the two big ones I have left that I'm very excited for. And of course, I always enjoy the shorts, so it's going to be interesting to sort of see which category has the best nominations, because there's usually one of the three that is a little bit weaker overall. I find it's usually the live action shorts or the documentary shorts. I'm
Yeah.
usually always impressed by the animated shorts, though.
I think the live action shorts is my favorite of the shorts categories for this year. It often is. I definitely favor live action and animated over docs in general, and I do this year as well. But for me, the live action shorts, like, I'm just like all bangers all the time.
Nice. Well, that's good to know for me going into them then.
Yeah, I did. I've recorded with Brandon as well.
Mhm.
We had a nice conversation about those, and he felt, yeah, he was also like live action great lineup this year. So I hope you enjoyed too.
Amazing. Well, he is the person that would know that better than anyone.
Right. Well, thank you, Dakota, for coming and sharing the things that you know better than everyone today. So it was great to talk to you about these four categories. And again, I will be linking in the show notes the link to your podcast, ContraZoom, and to the blog as well, where you can find some writing from me. Is there anything else that you want to mention coming up?
Uh, yeah, I'm in the throes of Oscar season, just like you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not too sure exactly when this is coming out, but we're going to do an Oscar draft. So we're going to pick movies based on who we think is going to have the most wins. So that's always a fun little short episode that I do. And then, of course, I'll do my final predictions episode right before the Oscars come out, and of course a recap as well. So yeah, I love Oscar season just like you do. That's why
Mm-hmm.
we do the death racing. So it's always fun getting to talk about the Oscars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely recommend, if you enjoyed Dakota's insights here, then you will get that there, as well as from other people with other areas of expertise joining you. You always have a great lineup of guest hosts with you.
Thank you. Yeah, especially one Alicia Brenner.
Yes, yeah. I'll link that. What was it? What did you call it? One, no, one begonia,
One
sentimental.
sentimental begonia after another.
Right.
Each episode I do two to three, three or four of the best picture nominees, and I try to come up with a clever title incorporating all of
All the
the
titles.
names. And
Yeah,
I was quite happy with myself coming up with that one, along
that's a
with
great one.
the last one that came out as well. I thought I did a really good job. The first one was tricky because it was all one word titles. Um, but yeah, the latest episode that came out, I named it Marty Frankenstein, the Train Agent.
Yes. Well.
That's just me being cheeky.
So I definitely recommend checking those out as well. Thank you so much, Dakota.
Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you again to Dakota for joining me for that very interesting technical conversation. I love this stuff. And thank you to all of you listening right now. I hope that you enjoyed that conversation just as much. If you did, please do share it with anyone else you think would also get something out of it. Clearly, this episode was recorded before the Society of Cinematographers Awards, and so those have now since happened, so I can update that the winner was One Battle After Another. So this is why I said earlier that, maybe my estimations have changed. This, to me, kind of makes One Battle After Another perhaps the front runner in cinematography, or a co-front runner with Sinners. I suppose that's the case for a lot of the different awards categories this year. Unfortunately, I think that means that Train Dreams might be out. We'll see. But I'll say, yeah, the Society of Cinematographers nominees are the exact same 5 that we have here. So One Battle beat Sinners, Train Dreams, Frankenstein, and Marty Supreme. But as I keep saying, this is such a chaotic award season. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily a lock for the Oscars. So this will be another nail biter. Now about the visual effects conversation. Very shortly after we recorded this, the Corridor crew, my favorite YouTube channel for learning about VFX, they put out their annual dive into the nominees in the VFX category. It's a 27-minute video, very interesting. You can see visual accompaniments to a lot of the things that we talked about. And they go, in some cases, a bit deeper, like they geek out over the technical details in Avatar. And though they agree on the writing and point out some logic issues, they give The Lost Bus its proper VFX flowers, since I was such a hater in our conversation. But I highly recommend checking out that video from the Corridor crew. You'll find that linked in the show notes. And I'll also link there, just after that, Warner Brothers put out a deep dive into the Sinners VFX. So again, you'll see a lot of the things that we talked about, more detail and some few other things as well. And yes, there's a lot of Sinners favoritism here, but it's my podcast and I'll push Sinners if I want to. Now, switching over to sound, the Seurat team did put out a video diving into the sound design and mixing with a lot more detail than we went into. So definitely recommend that as well. Now, we are nearing the end of our pre-Oscars series. There's only 2 episodes left, which will be coming in quick succession. One dedicated to writing and directing, and the final pre-Oscars episode dedicated to the acting and casting categories. But then David and I will be back after the Oscars to wrap it all up and to rank the Best Picture nominees ourselves, plus a few extras we're throwing into the mix. So stay tuned for that as well. Of course, there's lots of other non-award season stuff going on the Lorehounds main feed. There's weekly coverage of The Pit. There was a One Piece one-shot, and there will be some more One Piece Season 2 coverage coming soon. The Bone Temple coming soon. There was a check-in just recently about the Paradise new season. A Book Nook episode from the Earthsea series. And there's a lot more coming too, as always. Now, if you are a Supercast or Patreon subscriber, then you get all of these episodes ad-free, plus you get extra episodes, like this month's theme is Warehouse Wars for Second Breakfast, and for 11Zs, it is the March of the Millennials. Voting is currently open for subscribers as to which film we will cover. I'll say Mean Girls is leading with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou in second place. So if you are listening to this as it comes out, you have about a day or so still to cast your own vote. And of course, don't forget to check out the affiliates like Properly Howard, which just started a new season of film reviews, Never Mind the Music, which just put out an episode about Shania Twain, and Radioactive Ramblings, which just wrapped up their Fallout series with Invincible and The Boys coming soon. And now we have reached the musical thank yous part of our show with special thank yous for those who choose to support us financially. We can't tell you how grateful we are to all of you, starting with our Discord server boosters, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Duve71, Athena Angelea, Lestu, Nancy M, Ghost of Partition, Radioactive Richard, and Adrian. Thank you to all of our subscribers. You help us keep doing this. We especially could not do this without the lore masters, Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, SC, Peter OH, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Nathan T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Deli V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elysia U, Ben B, Scott F, Stephen N, Julia F, Collie S, Ilmariel, Paul K, Rocky Zim, Jessica A, Red Zippy, the TC Dopamini, Catch It, Eleanor, Mrs. Tennant, AC Wilson, Eli W, Cassie K, Chumbarooney, Katia, Josh Liu, Paintin' PDX, Corey G, Quinch, and always last, Adrian. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your week and hope to see you for the live Oscars viewing party chat this Sunday on the Discord. Bye.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.